Okay, I'm aerosolizing my droplets. Yes! And I feel okay about it. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to the kitchen table. Here we are, once again gathered, politely, nicely, a great group of people, wonderful stories to be told tonight. I can't wait for you to hear them. This is our third time doing it, and hopefully we'll have a lot more in the future. We've got some plans, God willing. We sent out a grant application recently, right, Val?
Yep.
And that would allow for us to have some workshops. So we would workshop stories, and people get to work together before putting on a performance, and do it on a monthly basis. And stay tuned. Those of you out there who really have an itch to do it, why not? Just do it. Come on up and share. Share what you have to tell us. It's exhilarating, to say the very least. And we want to hear it. Yes, we do. I'm not going to, when I looked at last year, I came up here and I blathered on for around 6 minutes. Didn't tell a story. I have no idea how I filled 6 minutes. I think like this. I don't know, I filled 6 minutes, and 6 minutes was a really long time, and 6 minutes didn't seem that long, but 6 minutes really went on for a long time. Yeah, thanks, Rob. All right, he can't wait to get up here. This guy, just want to tell you, if there's exits, if there's a terrorist attack or something, I'll jump in front and I'll take the bullets for you, and then you run out the exits, and everything will be just fine. Did I go dark too fast? I should lead up to that. Sorry. The theater itself, they had gone through great lengths to make this as safe an experience for all of you as possible. One thing, Millie, can you tell me some of the things?
That we did?
Yeah.
Yes, the air purifying system.
Yes, the air purifying system, yes.
Every 20 minutes.
Every 20 minutes on the dot. Yes, and what does it do?
It cleans the air.
It purifies the air. Yeah. Cleaning, I have a vision of a bunch of little guys coming out and cleaning the air. That doesn't. And what else? That's enough. That's enough. I shouldn't push for anything. That's more than enough. Thank you for taking those precautions on our behalf. And then what else is coming up? What's next week? Oh, we have Sammy Stevens coming up at the gazebo. That's next
Monday.
Monday. Wow. And that's free?
Yep.
Holy, you guys know Sammy Stevens? Oh man, she is amazing. What a voice, and her band is hot. They are, yeah, this is a freebie. Oh, you gotta come see this. I'll be there up in my window on the apartment overhead. You look up and I look like the Pope who's like trying to hide. I tell you, they elected me, I don't know why. Okay, well, we have 7 storytellers here tonight, and they have different types of stories. There's a definite build to them. And this first gentleman, this is an extremely great find. Last year, he had contacted me, and I had read his book, which is absolutely fantastic as well. He's a combat Vietnam veteran. Yeah. There it is, the Navy. I've been taking, I should just stop myself, you're all very welcome. He actually took he's going to have a 6-hour round trip today to come here and regale us with his story tonight. 3 hours one way, 3 hours the other way, with his lovely and wonderful wife, Colleen. Colleen, where are you? Hi, Colleen. Thanks for being with us, Colleen. And I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm going to bring up this gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Holberg. Yo, people! I'm here to tell you stories about BFBs. Has anyone been to Alaska? Dude, you've been there. You know what a BFB is? Big fuzzy bear? So I got a BFB story to tell you. First thing right up. I had broken my ankle and I was living in the woods with my black Labrador retriever, a little heathenette that I live with.
And we have been out having a great time, broke the ankle, things are good. A couple weeks later, I'm running around on crutches in the morning, crutch, and I get my coffee cup and open that sucker up to have a drink, close it up, crutch. Dog's out doing their stuff, my dear. Dog's out doing their stuff, having a great time, and all of a sudden, dog usually does sniffing, stuff like that. Dog comes running back to me, oh Jesus. And sure enough, how can I see him there? I can't see with this light on. So anyway, doggy comes running back, and I look down at the end of the gravel trail, and here comes the biggest BFB I've ever seen in my life. This is what's known as a 10 square bear. He's 10 foot tall, 10 foot wide, and he's probably hungry. And I have nowhere to go. I left my hand cannon, my 44 Magnums, back in my 25 foot holiday Rambler. And the only place I've got to go to get away from this bear, crutch, into this outdated outbuilding. Quadrant plywood. Door, hole is underneath the door, the whole end is open with chicken wire. Doggy and I hop into the outbuilding, close the door, little gold hat. And all of a sudden, jump the hell back! What is that underneath my door? That's a BFB's nose. It's about the size of Gibraltar. Big nose. So in my moment, I took my crutch and I beat that nose with my crutch. The nose disappears. Next thing I know, I'm listening, and I can smell my nose out there. It's kind of reminds me of one old dates, but I'm not going to. Anyway, underneath the door comes a footing. Under the door. That means he's belly up to my position. Wait a minute, this is a 10-foot bear. He's looking down on me from above. So I took the crutch and I nailed him on the foot. Boom! Footy stays there. Boom! Hit him again. The crutch goes Italian. Wow, around the corner. Jeez, I can't say those things right. Anyway, the bear's there. I know he's there. I can hear him. What am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I can't shoot him. He's probably going to eat me. This isn't good. So I decided I'm going to hop up on the crabber and see what I can see. So I take my good crutch and I push myself up on top and I look at him. He's right here. Hello. How are you this morning? Jesus, looking down on me and I'm on the crabber. So I didn't know what to do, so I screamed like a little girl. Ah! And at that moment, I slipped and I fell because the grapple lid had dew from the night. And it was slippery, and I didn't know what was slippery, and I went to move, and I did one of my moves, and down on the deck I go. I'm screaming, the dog's screaming, ah, woof, woof, woof. I don't hear him. I don't smell him. Well, at the end of the day, he must have been really irritated by all that noise, and I finally looked underneath the door, no BFB. So we finally, after all this is the end of the story. I made it back to the Holiday Rambler. I resumed a kind of a thingy with my stoller again. How did I ever forget that? You know, back in the day, you take clients out, and clients are fun people. They do all kinds of odd things, though. I've never thrown a client underneath the bus until tonight. Oh boy, here it comes. I'm not going to tell you they're doctors. So I get 3 clients. Client number 1, I meet in Seattle. I have been on respite out on the East Coast doing something with someone for some reason. Anyway, back in Seattle, I pick up client number 1. Next morning, we're going to fly to Juneau. We get Ketchikan, Sitka, and then Juneau. And my 2 clients are going to meet us in Juneau. Actually, I'll tell the story. Well, the night before, unbeknownst to me, I was being a good boy. I was in Seattle taking care of business. They have been out to a place called the Red Dog Saloon. Now this is a place you go inside and sawdust all over the floor, and just kind of a fun atmosphere. You walk through the door and the stage crew look at you and they, did you just get off the boat? Are you boat people? Who are you? Did I invite you here? They do that there. But these 2 characters, sat and they drank, from what they told me later on, Mexican beer. And they ate Mexican food. You getting a vision here, folks? So after they had their food and libations, they back to their hotel room for the night. Oh God, I shouldn't do this. doctor, well, client number one and I get to the airport in the morning, and there's my two doctors coming through. I didn't know. Doctor number two had some, my wife's gonna kill me, flatulence problems. Too much Mexicans, beer and food. Well, during the night, he had these, you shouldn't tell him, Rob, you shouldn't tell him. He had these explosions, and he had spittle all over his underbloomers. So he gets up the next morning and he showers and sport number three comes in and, dude, what are you gonna do with that? You gotta throw it away, you know, that's for that. Wow, you do that? He says, no problem, he sticks it on top of his bag. Zips his bag after the airport. So this poor Dr. Two's got spittle on his underbloomers in his bag, and doctor number one goes through the line and he goes to the metal detector, and poor woman stands, he says, you know, I check this guy, I mean, I think he's got contraband in his bag. Get a vision? Here goes my teeth almost fall. So here we go, doctor number two goes through, he gets through the metal detector part, and the lady looks at him and says, sir, I think I need to take a look in your bag. No problem, he even opens it up for her, boy, she reaches in there. She pulls this thing out and she looks at it. Here we go, ready? Ah! She throws it on the floor. She's pointing at it, screaming, ah! So doctor goes over and he looks and he picks up his underbloomers, pulls them on, puts them back in the bag, zips the bag up and gets on the airplane with us, and this poor woman, she's still sitting there, pointing at the floor, the lady, the underbloomers are gone. I shouldn't have done that, sorry. Poor guy with his underbloomers. You think it's a dull night, since don't travel with this. Anyway, all right, Tim's gonna want to get rid of me. I have a BFB story to tell you. You ready? I have this guy in my book, his name is Bad Dude, and he's actually a military cop. Oh, jeez. I almost killed him a few times in Alaska. But in this particular time, has anybody seen the Alaska Railroad program? On TV, Railroad, Alaska. It's called Whistle Stop. So you can get on and whistle a telkey. You need to tell the conductor, yo, conductor dude, I need to get off Troublesome Creek. Who knew? Troublesome Creek. I'm in a very ideal look, Alaska Rangers and that. Whew. So, the day comes, we go to the railroad station and we load our cooler and all our gear into the baggage car and sit up front. So, out we go. Train stops at Troublesome Creek. Now there's a reason why they call it Troublesome Creek. There are some times when you can't even go there by law, but we don't pay attention to law. It's great. Train drops us off anyway. We don't need any sort of permission. So the train drops us off. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Train goes away. We take all our gear out to our camp spot, dig a hole, put our cooler in it. We'll get prime rib for doing it tonight, believe it or not, in camp. So everything's just working. So we go down to the creek. We'll be fly fishing. We'll be catching rainbow trout. We had a good evening, went back, had a big meal, had a good night's sleep, drank some air breathing medicine. Yeah, we did. I confess. Whiskey and something, it's amber colored amber breathing medicine. So, second day, this is the day we're going to wake up there and go to sleep. This is all cool. This is wake up, go to sleep day at the same spot. We went fishing all day long, and we come back, and at the end of the day, oh boy, I said to bed, it's sticking out the back end of our tent. It's the caboose of the BFB. He's in our tent. Jesus, dude. Tell you what, why don't you take your fly rod and go give him a little wiggle on the bottom. See what happens? Jeez, well, I don't think that's a good idea. All right, I'm almost done. So I said, all right, we'll take our big guns out. As Clint Eastwood would say, the biggest gun in the world. We carry them, boy, they sure are heavy. Anyway, I'll say, you shoot that tree, I'll shoot this tree, we'll see what the bear does. Boom! Both guns were off at the same time. What we did not know was this bear did not have reverse. So, all of a sudden, the tent kind of goes, whoosh, and we can see claws coming up the back of my tent. Claws, and then there's a head sticking out the tent, and for all it was worth, it was wanting to get out of there. Next thing I know, there goes my tent. That bear is wearing my tent with a damn diaper. And he's like, there goes my toothpaste! And stuff's coming out of the tent everywhere. So to make a long story short, we finally did catch up with the tent. The bear was gone, but thank goodness. And all our stuff was kind of, we picked up our stuff. Used the tent up between a couple of trees the night for a little bit of shelter. Got on the train the next day and went home. Did have to buy a new tent. Thanks for listening to my Alaska stories.
I'll keep it going for Rob Holberg. Isn't he fun? 6 hours. My God. God bless you. And you too, Colleen. Yeah, so I don't know, most of you know that I'm a teacher, right? I am a teacher. If the kids are learning, yeah, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the first day going back, except for one thing, when you ask the kids, so how was your summer? And they tell me, well, I worked all summer, and then they tell me how much they made. And I find out that they have made at least 3 times more than I do. Yeah, and I'm sure they get great service, but I've already ordered my dinner for Monday, today. Should get here on time. Just kidding. Okay, everybody's working really hard, doing the best possible. Okay, all right, you got that taken care of. All right, next up, we have a downtown entrepreneur, makerspace, newly opened next door. Yep, and it's going gangbusters. It's wonderful to have you down here in the thick of things, and local Rangeley High School and middle school and elementary art teacher extraordinaire, ladies and gentlemen, Sonia Johnson.
Well, I didn't travel 6 hours, I traveled 6 seconds, but I was almost late, believe it or not. But anybody who knows me knows that's Sonia Johnson. And Tim didn't learn from this first round of storytelling not to invite me back, so my apologies, I probably ramble on. But he invited me here to tell a story, and I came for like a little practice the other day. And he asked me some good questions because, you know, as a teacher, as Miss Liberty will know, stories are essential in our success of our day. And as I told my story, he asked me some good questions. So I had to think back a little bit about why this story popped into my head. But a part of it is, you know, deciding to become a teacher. I think that, you know, there's some certain qualities that you have to have. And being a firstborn, is there anybody out there that's firstborn? Yeah, well, bossy. that sums it up in a nutshell. You got all these siblings, and maybe you don't, maybe you just have cats and dogs, but everybody gets told what to do if you're the firstborn. That's just how it is. So I think that at a young age, I was well on my way to be in training for this teacher role that I have. So that came to mind. I was like, yeah, well, bossy's going to be probably the roots of this story. That, and like I said, storytelling as a teacher. You know, you have an audience every day. I mean, you have kids looking at you, kids who think they're so cool, and kids who think they're not so cool, and you know, you're wondering, do I have that chin hair sticking out? Are the kids the right thing? Am I too old for that? You know, oh God, is my perfume offensive? You have so many variables. So, you know, the best way to keep kids in order is to just stymie them. You know, tell them tons of stories that make you relatable and also make you look a little crazy. So then at some point in time, they just go, I'm not going to question that woman because I don't get her. I don't know what she's talking about. So that's another tool. So bossiness and a little bit of that crazy storytelling. So here I am, fully equipped to share my story with you tonight. So at a young age, my mom was raising 4 children alone. And we didn't have a lot of money. Now, it's not that poor me story, but it is kind of. I got delegated to be the babysitter, which at a young age in my head, I was always thinking, you had the kids, why do I have to inherit them? You know, I didn't want to babysit, I would have had kids, you know, but you can't argue when, you know, you're a mere teenager or think you're full of it. But anyway, she'd leave me to charge a lot. And, you know, over time, to kind of control kids, this is my first teaching episode, I guess, I came up with these wonderful games that would help me to, number one, keep the kids occupied, because there were 3 of them, a brother just 2 years younger than me, who didn't really need a babysitter, he needed more like a cage, who was just horrific, and a younger brother and sister, 8 and 9 years younger. So when my mom left, it was pretty hectic in my house. But my mom made a mistake of moving a buffet, I don't know what they're called, the big things you normally have in a dining room. She moved it into our playroom one day. Well, firstborn, power-hungry girl said, I see a little opportunity here. Well, it wasn't long before I had half the linen closet dragged out and draped on this buffet, and I had the biggest chair that I could find perched on top of this lovely piece of furniture. And pretty soon there was the sheer curtains were out, and I think I was hanging all kinds of beautiful posters, and I became the queen. Well, lucky me, you know? And the queen took on this name called Mean Mother. And so Mean Mother was my, my delegated title, and my siblings were my servants. And you got to sit in the room dependent on, you know, how kind you were to the Mean Mother. Obviously, that was your goal in life. You had to please Mean Mother. So there was the playpen, you know, those little pop-up playpens that you put the children in so they wouldn't hurt themselves. That was kind of like the dungeon. And my littlest brother was usually delegated to the dungeon because he just would get in trouble if I couldn't cage him, you know, with that cage thing. And my brother was 2 years younger. He was essential. He was like the head of the knights and whatever. And the food gatherer. It was really, really crucial that Mean Mother got fed because things could get really bad if you didn't feed Mean Mother. So he was in charge of the Kool-Aid and the Ritz crackers with the peanut butter. Yeah, that was his job. So, and then my poor little sister, I don't know what her job was. I think she just played with stuffed animals. She was kind of the court jester. I don't know what she was. But on one of these days that I don't think I put my youngest brother in the dungeon, we were up in our little kingdom up there, me, enjoying my time up on my throne with my Archie's comics and my Ritz crackers, and I realized that there was a strange smell, and I couldn't quite figure out what might be causing that smell. So I sent my little servant, my food gatherer brother down to find out what the littlest one was doing. And there was screams galore. So the Mean Mother, really you gotta bother me, I gotta get off my throne, I gotta check on this kid, whatever. So I ran downstairs, only to find that my little brother had decided that he was gonna be the court scientist, and he wanted to figure out what happens when you take a pencil and you put the eraser on the burner of the stove. Well, he was really, I think, startled and scared. So the first thing he did was drop it on his lap and burn himself. So that was the screaming to go along with the smell. And then he decided he would drop it into a chair, which was those old chairs that were, you probably want to collect one now. They're beautiful, it's aluminum, but they're stuffed with the studs around them, but it was on fire. And then he put the eraser in the trash. So Mean Mother, of course, went into survival mode and picked my brother up, got him in the bathtub, turned the water shower on, just close the curtain. That would take care of that. And I go out into the kitchen, and I get the chair, and I run with the chair into the yard, and I have the hose on, and then the food gatherer's in screaming, the trash is on fire, the trash is on fire. So I get the trash outside, and I get the hose going, and so all of this is kind of smoldering and stinky, and a lot of screaming, and my mother arrives home, and of course she's looking at me like, what I left you in charge, and of course me, not being able to speak up, go, well, I didn't want to babysit in the first place, my mother wanted to be on her own, but I did, and I never said anything, and that's another quality of teaching that I now value very much. I didn't sass back to my mom, And I've learned that it's good to be bossy. You can find ways to control people with a little bit of craziness and learn to keep your mouth shut when you're in really big trouble. So guys, thank you for letting me share my story.
Sonia Johnson. Needless to say, Sonia is available for babysitting on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
I teach your children. Woo.
Yeah, and she starts with the glue, goes really great with flames. Yeah. Nothing goes together like art and science. Yeah, that was fun. Thanks, Sonia. Next storyteller. You know her, you've seen her. She's fantastic. We were so lucky to have her here in Rangeley. She is a teacher. She teaches neuroanatomy in the Bronx. And when she's not in the Bronx, she is here, thank goodness. And I would like for you to put your hands together for the storytelling of Liz Pimentel.
You're having your baby at home? What are you, crazy? That was my mother when I told her my plans for delivering my third child. So what I did to quiet her and calm her down was to ask, where were you born? And how old was Nana when she had you? And the answer was at home on the farm in Plymouth, Massachusetts at age 43. So my grandmother actually had all 10 of her children at home. My first child was born in a large urban hospital. And I had wanted only the most nurturing, warmest, drug-free environment for my child. And I had a birth plan, and in the birth plan it said that I would have no anesthesia, and I would not take any medication to cause the delivery to progress, and my husband would be in the delivery room with me, and I would nurse the baby exclusively. He would be breastfed exclusively. So when I showed the birth plan to my feminist, Yale-educated obstetrician who I trusted completely, she said, no, birth plans don't go according to plan. You know, you can't really plan these things. And she really kind of scoffed at my birth plan. So, and she was right. They didn't go according to plan. So at about 32 weeks of gestation, I told her that I felt the baby's head was underneath my diaphragm. And she felt it, and she very smugly said, no, that's his tight little butt. So, you know, what do I know? She's the doctor, so I said, okay, you know, went along with that. Well, 2 weeks after my due date, and after 15 hours of labor, and this was 1985, okay, so after 15 hours of labor, they finally did an ultrasound, and they determined that the baby was in fact breech, with the head up under my diaphragm and the feet down, just like I had said. So I had to have an emergency cesarean section, which meant I had general anesthesia, I was out cold, my husband could not be in the delivery room, he was relegated to a waiting room. And when I finally came to, I found that they had given my baby sugar water instead of my nutritious breast milk. So I said, it's going to be different next time. So 2 years later, when I was going to have my second child, I found, I wanted to go to a completely different doctor, and I wanted to take some control over the delivery of my baby. And I wanted to avoid the complications of C-section, the nerve damage, the longer recovery time, and the postpartum depression that I had suffered. So I found a different doctor. He was skilled in VBAC, which stands for vaginal birth after cesarean, which was a rarity in those days. And he worked at a smaller hospital, which I thought would be nice. And I did have the baby without surgery, but he had this, this technique of pressing on your abdomen every time you had a contraction. So he was squeezing on my abdomen, and by the end of, by the time the baby was delivered, I felt like a used tube of toothpaste. So when it came time for the third baby, I just, I wanted to have a home birth, I wanted a nurturing environment, and I wanted to take my power back over the baby that was coming out of my own body. So I, I decided I would have a home birth, and my sister, who's married to a doctor, said, well, why don't you take the necessary precautions and go to a hospital? It's much safer, because back then, age 35 was considered the age for geriatric pregnancy, what it was called back then, and as we all know, age 35 is really old, right? But that did put me, being over 35, did put me at risk for hypertension, diabetes, miscarriage, and because I had a scar in my uterus, there was a chance of uterine rupture. And friends of mine felt compelled to warn me of the dangers of home birth. But, I tried to keep a positive attitude and to persevere and to say that I would take the necessary precautions and strategies to protect myself and my baby. And I would channel my Nana. Now, Nana was born in northern Italy, and she had nothing more than a grade school education. And she came over on the boat with 3 small children and met my grandfather at the pier in Boston. And he took her to the home in Plymouth, Massachusetts, to the farm. And there she became very admired and revered. People would come to her for advice. She lived to 94, so she was sort of like the wise elder. But she also became the midwife for many of the Italian immigrants in that Italian neighborhood in North Plymouth. So, she had this community of people that really respected her. Unfortunately, my peers didn't give me as much respect and admiration as her community gave her. So I decided I needed to devise a strategy for success for myself, and that I would create my own community, my own village. So I found a group of women who had had previous cesarean sections, who wanted to have vaginal births. And through them, I found a doula who would help me through the labor process, support me, and would be there for the delivery. And I found a certified nurse midwife who would deliver my baby at home, who had physician backup at a local hospital. And my husband and I took a course in birthing at home. I learned what exercises to do, what materials I would need, and how to keep my contractions strong. So, I would keep active so that my contractions would stay strong. And I, just felt that I would, channel my Nana and, and do this thing. So, and the naysayers, to the people who, were telling me don't do it, I just said, look, my grandmother had 10 children in her own home. I think I can do it once. So, a few months later, I was lying in bed in my own bedroom and looking across the room to the amethyst rosary beads that I had hung on a dresser mirror that belonged to my grandmother that were handed down to me, a cherished keepsake. And I, called upon her, and she became my emotional, my spiritual midwife. And, I conjured her strength, and I gave birth to my 9-pound baby boy. And when my older son yelled out the window to the children, his friends playing below, that his mother just had a baby. It was like the white smoke heralding the election of a new pope. I can't say that I did alone, because I had my husband, I had my doula, I had my midwife, and my children were being watched by the daughter of my sister, who was the one who had told me not to have a home birth. So, but I can say that I did it without any medicinal intervention or physical or surgical interventions. And I did it in the comfort of my own home, with the loving support of friends and family around me. And I did it with this, this local support group, just like my grandmother did. And sometimes in order to move forward, we have to go back to our roots.
You can do it. I have confidence in you.
I can do it, just.
You didn't burn them already, did you?
No.
Sorry. You closed it, didn't you?
There you go.
Yeah, did you guys know it's breastfeeding week? Look at that. Yeah. Just like that. It's hearing a story like that, just before I stubbed my toe on the table over there and I screamed for bloody murder, like, this woman is like turning a little pioneer woman. They're very nice. Yeah, but yeah, it is. It's breastfeeding week. Anybody else know this? Yeah. Yeah. Who knew? I think it deserves more than just a week, though. That's my take on it. Okay. Thank you, Liz. That was fantastic. All right. Next up, he's a three-timer. He's 3 for 3. He was here for the first and second storytelling, and there's a reason why. He is the head of our government here in Rangeley. He is the biggest of the cheese that there is. He's the man that we selected. He is a first-rate, second-rate, irate individual. You love him, I love him. Let's hear what he has to say. Ethan Schaefer.
It was no secret that I wouldn't be headed back to St. Joseph's College for the fall semester. So I started my landscaping job like I would in the summer if I was going to go back to college. So I really didn't have anything in my mind except for that. I had nothing to look forward to. Did that job about 2 weeks, and I get a phone call out of the blue. It's my buddy Jared's dad, John. And the phone call goes like this. Hello, Ethan, it's John. Hey John, what's going on? So do you want to work or what? Do you want a job? Well, I got a job. Oh, a job where you make money. Maybe, well, call me in a week. And he hangs up. So I knew John owned a bridge company of some sort, and I knew it was hard work, it was scary work. So I had to think about this, but I knew I had to call John back within a week because I didn't want him to call back. So I asked some questions. I knew some guys that had worked for him before, and I thought to myself, well, I've never been to Boston, I'm not doing anything here, so what the hell? As it turns out, I had just met a girl in March, and she lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so this was going to make that relationship a little bit easier. So my buddy Jared cruised up, after I called John, and picked me up, took me down to Boston, and I worked there for the summer. I'd spin around in a little rubber safety boat on the bridges, making sure I picked up the dead guys if they fell, and I had a bucket van I was in charge of, and what we did was we rigged bridges for engineers so they could inspect the bridges for safety, and that was my summer. I worked all over New England, Connecticut, little rural places in Vermont, and of course downtown Boston and some really seedy places that I'm glad I don't work at anymore. But I did that for the summer, and the work started drying up. So I didn't have to work every day, and I'd sleep late, because back then I could sleep through a stampede of elephants playing show tunes with trumpets. And so I did that often. Well, one particular day, I was sleeping late, and apparently a phone call I'd been trying to get through. Back then I had one of those little Nokia phones, you could play Centipede on it and stuff. And they didn't work that well, and the cell service wasn't even that good, even 40 miles south of Boston in southeastern Massachusetts. So I didn't hear that come through because it didn't come through, but in the house I lived in, which was my employer's house, I lived in the basement. It was a nice finished basement, a split level house. And the office was in the main area of that basement. So the business phones were out there, and that sucker just kept ringing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I just want to sleep. It's important, or it was to me. So finally I answered the phone, which I never did. And it was my girlfriend, Nancy. She's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm sleeping. It's my day off. And she's like, turn the television on. And I said, why? She's like, just turn it on. Somebody crashed an airplane into a building in New York City. I said, all right, fine. So I figured it was a Cessna or something, because that's happened before. So I meander upstairs, filled with the 2 or 3 remote controls. And I said to her, what channel? And she said, it doesn't matter. So I turned the television on, just in time to see the first World Trade Tower come down. My mouth was open, and I had no idea what I was looking at. I don't remember the rest of that conversation. The only thing I do remember is Nancy said, Harvard's sending us home, because she worked there on Mount Albert Street at that time. And you should come up. And I knew I had to, because I'm sitting there alone in a house, a long ways from home, not knowing what I'd just seen, and the only person that I loved or cared about was 40 minutes up the road. So I got in my '94 Chevy Silverado, I got on Route 24, and I started heading towards Boston. Now that was a little disconcerting, because I knew I was headed to a major city, and I know this happened in New York, but none of us knew what was going on, and I knew that Logan Airport had something to do with what I had just seen, because I heard the news anchor say something about it. So I drove up, I got on 93, and I see this one airplane flying over, and I'm looking out the window. It was the only one. It went over, but made me nervous. And the closer I got to Boston, the traffic started slowing down. Big dig was going on at that point, so that wasn't weird. But I got a little closer, and we were converging on, not one of the tunnels, but up near the, well, I guess we call it the Fleet Center back then, it's the Garden. And the traffic slowed down, and it stopped. Like I said, that's not uncommon for traffic to be stopped in Boston at any point in time during the day, but it was different. The traffic stopped, and people were talking to each other. People with windows down, conversing with each other. People standing in the highway with their doors open, asking the next guy if they knew anything about what was going on. It was an impromptu support group of unfamiliar faces. There was love and fear on I-93, just south of Boston. Now, I don't remember getting off Sullivan Square exit, and I don't remember parking the truck. But I remember finding Nancy, giving her a hug, and walking down Cambridge Street to find her mom. She was at a hair salon. And I walked in there, and all the ladies in there were talking about the same thing. So in the coming weeks, I would cruise up from Easton to Boston, and I'd cruise back late at night, and I'd sit in the driveway and listen to news talk radio for hours. Like the cigarettes were just rolling out of my ashtray. I'd be there until 3 in the morning, because I needed information. I needed to know what had happened, and what the next thing was that was going to happen, and what we were going to do about it. And that's what I did on my days off, which were plentiful in September. So about a month later, I moved back up here because there was no more work, and I took a job doing something else up here. About a year later, a little less, I cruised down in July to see Nancy, and we decided we'd walk down to the Charles River for the 4th of July fireworks. I'd never seen city fireworks, and I'd always been up here for them. So we decided to do that. And now, things are still weird, and anyone that was alive back then knows that things were still weird, and this was our first Independence Day after that event. And in the months preceding that, you know, people were afraid to go to ball games and any venue that had large crowds. So we decided to walk down there. I don't know, it's a mile or two. I'm sure I'll get that part wrong. But we walked down to the Charles, and on the way down, I'm watching fighter jets fly over the city. At nighttime, it was weird. You know, I mean, you see plenty of jets in Boston, but not fighter jets. So we walked closer to the river, and we get right on the outskirts of MIT's campus, and there's military personnel in full fatigues with semi-automatic rifles all around, and helicopters going over. If you give me some butterflies. Well, we did it anyways, and we took our seat on the curb on Memorial Drive, waiting for the fireworks to start. So if you've never seen fireworks, as I said, in a city, it's highly recommended because they're spectacular. The Boston Pops play on the other side of the river at the half shell, and they play music that goes with the fireworks. So it begins, and we're all watching, and we're all taking it in, and there's colors and blasts and boom boom, and it's great. And then the finale comes, and it's a finale, and it seemed like it would go on forever, and then suddenly it stops. It's dead silent, 1.5 million people on two sides of the Charles River, and it seems like there's no sound. And then a voice comes over the speaker, and the president's giving a speech. And it's a speech he gave at Ground Zero that many of us listened to, either when he did it or years, you know, over the years. And while he's talking, suddenly these little balls of fire start floating down from the sky. It was almost like heaven took a big hand and just opened it and threw an ocean of fairy dust over top of us, like a big blanket of hope. And that sounds like a cliche, but we kind of needed it back then. And the president's talking, and there are no politics involved. And these things are floating down, and I'm watching one, and I'm watching it, and I'm watching it. And it just keeps getting closer to, and right before it gets to me, the fire burns up. I reach up and I grab it. It's this little parachute with a pyrotechnic they had attached to it, but it just looked so amazing coming down. So I kept it. I have it somewhere. I wanted to keep it. I wanted to remember that moment. I wanted to remember working for a bridge company one summer. I wanted to remember an event that changed everybody's lives. And I wanted to remember a day that felt like a bridge, that we built humanity out of tragedy. And it was amazing.
Ethan Schaefer. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks for sharing, as always. Our next storyteller, if you don't recognize the face, you'll recognize the voice. She's our local seamstress, a diva extraordinaire, incredible singing voice, speaking voice. You're going to love her story, and we love her. Ladies and gentlemen, Hannah Mather.
And I just love seeing her. Whenever I see her, I remember a lot of things about my life. And a lot of things about who I have been and where I've come from. I don't remember actually meeting Chloe. She was just always there. We weren't exactly in the same groups of people. She was part of the hippie crowd and I was part of the Baptist crowd. We didn't really mix except when it came to vegetation. Not that kind. The kind you eat. And so her mother and my mother were both really into gardening and botanics and probably a few other things that I just didn't really pay attention to. And I'm sure we had some other mutual friends. I know that when we were teenagers, we were invited over to a home where they would have the adult party upstairs and the kids party downstairs. And she was always there as well. And it's strange because nothing really strikes me except that she was always just lovely and kind and never needed to make noise to get attention. And she didn't seem to be a mean person at all. Through high school and then after college, we kind of didn't really see each other that much. We really didn't really get to know each other until we both became parents. She had gone off into the world, into the Peace Corps, and met a great guy, and then got married, and I went off and had a kid, had my daughter, and about that same time, her mother passed away. And she somehow, through just little things, we always would see each other, and just sort of, it was always a hello. Not a deep conversation, but somehow there was a connection with each other. It really wasn't until I had come back. We were in the Machias area, by the way. And I lived in East Machias and she was in Machias. That's two different sides of the track right there. But I had my daughter first and came back to the Machias area and had my son. I gave up for adoption. I told that story last year. And then was pregnant with my son, Eamon. And at that time, Chloe started hosting women's dinners, potlucks at her house. And just continuing on with her role that her mother had filled in many ways. And to me, an amazing spirit with her just constant grace and willingness to offer all of herself into everything that she did. And she would provide these just peaceful opportunities for women of different walks of life to come together. And through these times, I found her to be a safe person that I could start to open up to. And she didn't judge me or see me differently than I saw a lot of other people doing that. And I was struggling. It was a hard time in my life. My son's father wasn't around, which hadn't been expected on my part. And she was the one I would call at night, like after my daughter was in bed and I'd be washing dishes, or if I just needed to talk about stuff, and I would call her. And we became just close without any foreshadowing necessarily. When I gave birth at home to him as well, it's beautiful to hear the story. She was the one to come over and actually nurse him because my milk wouldn't come in, and she was still nursing her son. We had all given birth at home with the same midwives, and there was this kind of network there with us. And then 2 weeks after he was born, my house became infested with fleas. Apparently there was no insulation in my house. It was the oldest house in East Machias, but it was filled with rodents. And so we had to literally jump ship, and we just went over and stayed at her house until somebody else came and cleaned it up. So a couple of years later, when we had to move into a new apartment, that house was just falling apart. I couldn't keep living there anymore. And we relocated into another apartment in town, in Machias. And that was fine, I thought, until one of my son's WIC appointments, his lead count read 14, which apparently is not okay. And basically everyone had to evacuate that apartment building because when they had stripped the paint to repaint it, they just literally left all the lead paint in the ground all around and in a lot of other places, and they had to redo the whole place, but it left us homeless. And through some ugly situations with his father, the domestic violence shelter in town was willing to take us in, and there was a lot of things going on. I was actually quite worn out, and my willingness to stay strong and graceful had failed me. And we went to this domestic violence shelter thinking it was a place where we could kind of regather ourselves and figure out a way to live. I had a lot of physical injuries and just wasn't able to continually maintain the things I needed to in life to maintain a home. So I kind of relaxed at this shelter and trusted the workers too much. But when a stressed out mother confides to a woman who's not had children about how sometimes you just don't want to be touched, that you just feel this reflex to push your children away from you, they don't understand that it's just a metaphor. So they suggested that my kids needed to be away from me for a while. And my daughter went and stayed with Chloe, but they wouldn't let them stay, well, they would not let them stay together, but she had 2 boys, and it was just like too much. So my daughter was staying with her, and it's a little farm, so she had chickens and ducks and geese and other things, I don't know. And my son stayed with a lovely family just down the street, and I visited them. And I was dealing with things on my own and feeling pretty good about myself. Like I was starting to get a grip on my emotions and what I could do. And I had gone to get my son one day to have lunch with him, and we came back to the shelter to get something. We're about to go to lunch when one of the workers came to me and said, "We need to speak with you." And I said, "Okay," and we're going to go get lunch. And so, "No problem, just wait a few minutes." Well, 2 hours, almost 2 hours later, we're sitting there, we're still waiting, very hungry. They finally bring us in to say, "You need to leave. You're too emotional. You have to go. And you need to leave by 4 o'clock because that's when no more staff is here and you have to be gone," which was like 2 hours away. So I packed up all my stuff in black trash bags and stuffed them in my van and called Chloe and drove to her house at the same time. And she wasn't there, but her gas tank was empty. So we just went in, it was that kind of house, and crashed. And she came home and found us before she got her message. And the next day, the Child Protective Services showed up to challenge that I was of danger to my children, and we had to go through this whole thing. Apparently, the domestic violence shelter people had called CPS on me, and after our interview and investigation, I received profuse apologies from Child Protective Services, but not from the domestic violence shelter, which maintained their stance that I was a threat to my children. And in that first month at Chloe's house, I pretty much just had a complete breakdown and didn't move. And she took care of my children just as if they were her own. And I just lay there, and we would talk sometimes, but the second month I started to kind of gather myself together and was just so grateful to have someone, and her husband was so lovely as well, and take care of us. And I wanted to reciprocate and give something. I had nothing, but I had my sewing skills. So they had this big old reading chair that all the upholstery was coming off, and it was kind of ugly. So she asked if I could recover it for her. And I just used some really fun textured fabrics and colors and made this big, just happy, looks like a happy Dr. Seuss chair. And they just, curl in that and read. And of course my kids would curl in that. And but by the end of the 2 months, it was time for their families to be coming for holiday vacations. And we had to find a new place to live. And there's more to that story, another 8 months of kind of squatting here and there until we just kind of jumped ship and ultimately landed homeless in Rangeley, where I have been elevated to a much better place. But of all things, who vacations here in Rangeley every year but Chloe and her family? So every year I've got to see her. And not once have we ever had to plan a visit. We just cross paths on the street. And we would just talk, and it was just always just meant to be, and it always felt like we just picked up from yesterday. And she's just celebrating my life, and I'm able to be celebrating hers. We both moved away from Machias, and so we've been down to visit them as well a couple times. But this last time she came up to visit was just, it felt so wholesome. For so long I felt like she was just someone who had things together more than I did. And I didn't feel intimidated by her. I felt inspired by her. You know, there would be times when I would complain on the phone with her or something, like so-and-so treated me this way again, or they didn't understand, and she would just offer me a different perspective and point of view that helped me to have compassion on the whole thing and not be angry or judgmental. And I'm just so grateful for her. We met this time literally while she was running and I'm driving, and we just stop and stand on the road and talk, and people drive around us and we're just talking. We're like, this is just like being back home, and being here, it's not much different, and in some ways got the old town feel, and we both have that. And then we did actually, I just happened to call her up and I said, hey, you want to get lunch? And she was like, I was just going to message you. And so I know there's a video I think I show, but to me she's one of the most graceful and elegant and beautiful women in the world. And she doesn't think so. She doesn't like to have pictures taken of her. She's very humble, but to many of us who love her, she's one of the most beautiful, graceful women in the world, and such a gift. We went out to lunch, and I was so excited. I wanted to treat her because I could finally. And she said, you know, I know you can. You'll have your chance in the future, but it's my turn now. And then she came to the shop, and the dress you see her wearing is one of the dresses I've made from probably a bedspread that was at a cabin in Rangeley for years. And it just fit her like a glove. And just to see her feeling so delighted in, she's like, another one of your creations. Like, she has a few of them now, repurposed a few things for her also. And I was really, when I came into this, I was really just feeling strongly about what did I really want to focus on, what do I want to focus on in life right now. And years ago I had tattooed on my arms the words gentle grace, because I needed to learn that for myself and for people, and to be kind and compassionate. And compassion and kindness was really what came up. And when I think of Chloe, and I think of all the opportunities, just crossing paths with her in life has been such a gift and enriched my soul and my life and those in my life. So this is just my ode to Chloe, and I'm grateful for her and all the others like her.
Anna Mather. Thanks, Anna. I think we can all agree it'd be nice if we all had a Chloe in our lives. Yeah. Thanks. Next up, she's a mainstay here at the theater, to say the very least. She has lent her talents to everything we could possibly do here at the theater. She also heads up the drama camp for how many years now? 4 years? Yeah, mother of two, divine goddess. That's on your resume, I believe. Okay, all right, I'll bring you up now. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Bauer-Crum.
Okay, there's not going to be any tears in this story. Just letting you know, people. Push the Wayback Machine, Ann Bauer-Crum. So I was Ann Bauer, obviously, in high school. And in high school, I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and I was raised Catholic, and I'm pretty much who I am today. And it's funny because, you know, parents say that, they're like, kids are born the way they are. Well, I was born this way. So I was the type of kid who really got along with just about everybody. I wasn't in a clique. I wasn't, you know, I'm smart, but I wasn't like the clique with the smart kids. I played sports, but I wasn't a jock. I did the theater, but I wasn't a theater person. I just kind of mingled with everybody. So, the year was about 1986, And I was a part of a youth group where you meet once a week, you sing songs, and you talk about, positive things and all that. And there was a dozen or so kids, I don't know how many, 15. And one of the boys there did not go to either Mercy, of course he didn't go to Mercy because I went there and it was all girls, but he didn't go to our brother school, Xavier. He was a public school kid who I didn't really know very well, but he was nice. He wasn't the smartest kid. He wasn't the cutest kid. He wasn't the wealthiest kid, but he was nice. And I knew him, and that was fine. And like I said, I kind of got along with everybody. So, his name's John Zarenka, DZ, in case you're curious, Tim. DZ, Zarenka. So anyway, John Zarenka approaches me one April afternoon at this youth group, and he says, "Ann, what are you doing May 14th? And I go, I'm 17 years old, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I don't know." He goes, "Do you want to go to prom with me?" I go, "Sure." So now I'm stuck, right? Because I didn't have plans, and he asked me that way, and it wasn't like I could make something up, and now I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go to prom with John Zarenka. And I don't go to his school, I don't know anything, so I'm like, oh my gosh. So the next week I see him, and I go, yeah, prom. This is going to be great. But you drive a rusted out old pickup truck. Can we take my car, would you mind? And he's like, no, I don't mind. Now, I drove a really stylish 1975 Honda Civic hatchback in brown. Thank you. That was better than his truck, so that tells you something. So anyway, I go, okay, great. So he's like, I'll pick you up at, whatever. So I said, that's fine, everything. So I put on my pretty dress and I do my makeup and it's prom. And to give you an idea, I think, Tim asked me, he goes, so was this, I go, I think I went to 5 or 6 proms. And I didn't go with any boyfriends. Guys were like, hey, Ann, you want to go prom? I'm like, sure, I'll go prom. So that's who I am today. So anyway, he shows up in his pickup truck, and I'm going to follow him to his house. I don't even know where he lives. So he shows up, and he's in his tuxedo, and he's all smiles and everything else, and he hands me a bouquet of roses, and I was like, oh, John, thank you. And then he puts the corsage, the wrist corsage on my hand, and it's a dozen sweetheart roses, weighs about 4 pounds. So I'm like, thank you, John, thanks. So I've got the rose. And then he hands me a little jewelry box with earrings and a necklace, and I'm like, oh, no, this is really not going to go well. He's in love with me. So I'm like, 17 years old. And I'm like, great, John, you shouldn't have. And I try to give the jewelry back, right? I'm like, oh, I can't, you're just too generous. He's like, no, Ann, I want you to. I'm like, okay. So, yeah, okay. So I get in my Honda Civic, and he gets in his pickup truck, and I follow him to his house on this, it was a beautiful day, right? And so we get there, and we're going to leave his truck there, and I'll drive, and then drive him back, and then I'll drive home. So, get out of the car, and his parents and his sister come out. We're going to take a lot of photos and everything else, right? And then his aunts and uncles come out, and his grandparents come out, cousins come out. There's 40 people on the lawn taking pictures of John because he has a date to the prom. And it's me, and I'm like, oh, nice to meet you all. Yes, oh, this is, oh, okay, you too. Oh, like this, okay, like that. Okay, all the pictures. So I'm like, okay, Ann, you can survive this, right? Everything's good. So he says, okay, we're going to go to my friend's house, and he knows where the prom is being held. It's in a different town, and we're going to follow him. Okay, John, whatever you say, it's your prom. So I'm driving with my big dress and the puffy sleeves and the hair, because it's 1986. And my little shoes that are like dyed. Remember we used to dye our shoes, right? So I've got like matching shoes, and it's mauve. Tim didn't know what mauve was. It's a peach, lavender, pink color, right? Like that's kind of mauve, and my mauve dress. So, okay, so we go to his friend's house, right? And his friend's, he's got his date, and she's like their boyfriend and girlfriend and stuff. And I'm like, nice to meet you, it's all good. And they're like checking me out, like up and down, because John has a date to the prom. So, and it's me. So, this kid drives a Camaro. We get on the highway, and that Camaro goes, and my Honda Civic, right, he's gone. He's gone within 3 minutes, and I'm like, John, I don't know what to do. I had it on the floor. This is not, he's gone. So we pull over on the highway. I'm like, I seriously don't know what to do. He's like, well, I think it's exit, 19, and I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, I'll smile. We'll find it, right? This is the prom. So a state trooper pulls over and goes, are you okay? And I'm like, sir, we're obviously trying to find the prom, and I think it's at this hotel and their venue. And he goes, okay, I know where that is, and he gives us directions to the prom. So I'm like, great. I'm like, okay. The entire family, the Ranka family is out, and his friend, and now we're lost. And so we finally get to the prom, and we're not late, we're still on time. So we get there, and they, of course, do the pictures, and we sit down with all of his friends, and assigned seats, and everybody's eyeing me because I'm John's date. And so, because no one in his school wanted to go with it. So there I am in my mauve dress and my 4-pound corsage, and I start making small talk. I'm like, so, what's the band like for later when we all dance? And they're like, it's a DJ. I'm like, that's even better. They can play whatever we want. And I'm like, stop making small talk with people you don't know. You're 17. You're clueless. So I said, okay, great. And I didn't spill anything. I had nothing in my teeth. It was a success for me. So the music starts. Okay, and the DJ's playing, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna have to slow dance with this guy because it's his prom, but I don't really want to. So we got a slow dance over with, and I was like, John, I think I'll sit this one out. Then they start playing Rock Lobster, B-52s, right? So I'm like, John, we gotta dance. So he's like, okay. So we're dancing to Rock Lobster, and someone steps on my dress and rips it. Okay. So, I'm thinking, I can get through this night, okay? It's just a prom. I've been to a bunch. Not like this. So I go, okay, and it wasn't even on the seam. It was the fabric. Ripped it, like a good 3 feet. I'm like, I'll be right back. So I go to the hotel lobby and I say, do you have any Scotch tape? My organza is ripped. So I tape up my dress so it doesn't look like a train that more people are going to stomp on. So now I'm wearing my taped up mauve organza dress with the big sleeves with the 4 pounds of flowers, and I'm still hanging in there, right? So the prom finally ends, and everybody's happy, and the pictures are taken, and the food's taken away, and his friends go, Sherry or somebody, they have a boat down at the marina near where we live. Let's go there. I go, that's fine. We can go there. Do you know where it is? And he's like, yeah, I do. I'm like, not getting lost again. So I go, you know what? I think I need to get gas in my tiny little car. And he's like, no problem. We pull up. He's like, I got the gas. I'm like, thank you, John. So I wait, and he's pumping gas. And then all of a sudden, he's pumping gas. It's an 8-gallon tank. Okay? He drives a pickup truck. He tries to put 12 gallons of gas in my 8-gallon tank, and it's pouring all over the car, all over his shoes, and he gets in, and now it stinks of gasoline, but I do have a full tank of gas. So I'm like, Ann, it's good. You can survive this. You know what? It's his prom. You gotta just chin up, right? So we get down to the marina. And it's 11:30 at night or 11 o'clock at night, I forget when it was late. And so I was like, okay, where's the boat? And they go, it's right here. It was on dry dock. There's a ladder to get into it. I've got dyed shoes. I'm like, I'm not going up there. Are you kidding me? So finally I do the one. I go, oh, John, you know what? Can you get a ride home with one of your friends? And he said, oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you for a great night. I got into my car, that stank of gasoline, and drove home. And I was like, okay, you survived. That was an event that I'm still talking about 35 years later. So, with the ripped dress, which I threw out, the 4 pounds of roses, I had more roses and jewelry that I never wore, pictures, and Tim said, is there pictures? I'm like, there are pictures, but I don't have any. I'm sure John Zarenka, wherever he is, has pictures, but I don't. So anyway, I survived the prom. A few weeks later, I see him at the youth group, and everybody at the youth group knows we went to prom together because he had to tell everybody. And they go, John, how was prom? And he said, we had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, if I see any high schoolers next year who are having difficulty finding a date for the prom, I know where to steer them to. Mauve. Yeah. Yeah, you all need to know that all across America, there's a patron saint of proms, that's Anne, and all little boys get down on their knees and pray to it. Oh, please let Debbie go with me. She'll say yes, guaranteed. Yeah. Thank you. Next up, last not least, this gentleman, I've known him for many years. It was my good fortune to have him as a student. Class of 2012. We just clicked. There's something there. I think our love for pop culture perhaps may have something to do with it. We're two extremely funny people. See?
Thanks for setting me up.
Yeah. Works at Skowhegan Country Club Inn. One of the greatest people I've ever known in my entire life. I'm not over-exaggerating. Hudson DeRaps.
So the story I'm going to tell isn't really funny, but thanks, Fred. I'm waiting in Tampa for a picture to show up, because that's on my side. There it is! This is my favorite picture of myself, clearly. It's an inside joke between me and a close friend. She made it for me. I love it. It took on a very dark meaning 3 months later when I was in the ambulance dealing with a heart issue. So, 2019, at Thanksgiving, maybe did a little too much drinking the night before. Maybe did some other things too much before too, but it's fine. And I'm playing with my niece, and I'm like, ugh, just feels a little tight. I'm like, yeah, it's probably a panic attack. I've had those before. I'm just gonna lay down for a minute. Apparently that's a bad thing to do when you're having a heart thing. I didn't know that. It's fine. So, I'm laying there. I'm like, it's not feeling well. My mom comes in. She's like, listen, I'm not saying we should do this, but let's be safe. Let's just go to the ambulance bar and have them check you out. I'm like, this feels like overkill, but whatever. We go down there. EMT is super nice. He's like, yeah, you're probably fine. They hooked me up to a heart monitor. My heart was going 210 beats per minute, which is faster than most athletes. So they were like, all right, we're going to do these things called ventricle maneuvers to try to slow your heart rate back down and kind of, make things normal again. I'm like, okay, so he gives me a throat massage. I don't know if there is such a thing as a normal throat massage. This one didn't feel normal. He puts my legs above my head. He puts ice packs all over my face. None of this is working. So he's like, all right, we're going to hook you up to an IV, and we're going to give you this thing called adenosine. I'm like, what's that do? He's like, it's going to stop your heart. I'm like, cool, let's, why not? It's Thanksgiving, let's do it. So he hooks up the IV to my arm, and he's like, all right, I'm going to give you 6 milligrams of this. And he does it. I'm like, God, clearly nothing happened. He's like, all right, we're going to give you 12. 12 doesn't work. So I'm like, are we going to 18? That seems a little overkill to me. He goes, we're going to 12 again, and that doesn't take, what has to happen, right? We look each other in the eyes. There's an understanding of what that means. My mom, on the other hand, goes, what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm like, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. They do it, doesn't take. He's like, all right, ma'am, you now need to leave and follow us down to Farmington because we're definitely going to the hospital now. She's like, what does that mean? He goes, I'm going to use the paddles on your son's heart. Closes the door. So the last thing my mom sees is me being like, laying down on the gurney being like, yeah, I'm probably going to be fine. This will work out. So we probably hit like Furbish in the ambulance and they're getting ready to give me the good drugs to make me forget that they're going to shock my heart. And it just starts gradually coming back down. And I'm like, is that good? Did you do something that I didn't know about? He's like, no, this can happen. This is a natural way that this can happen, but not really what we wanted. My heart rate goes down from 210 to about like 180 to like 140, and it hovers around like 96 to like 103. Very specific, but you'll see why I remember these numbers later on. I'm like, all right, like this is fine. He goes, all right, pop off your shoes. I'm like, what? He's like, I need to check your feet. I think you lied to me earlier when I asked you if you did drugs. I'm like, what? He's like, people shoot up in their feet. I'm like, okay, I guess you can look at my feet. So looks at my feet, clearly no track marks. He's like, so you don't do any of the things we asked you that would have caused this heart problem? I'm like, no, none of them. So over the next 40 minutes, me and this guy become best friends. You know, we're laughing about everything else. So now, my mom, who had probably the most stressful car ride of her life, is getting out, running into the emergency room, being like, my son's dying. I'm hanging halfway out of an ambulance because the gurney got stuck, and me and my new best friend are laughing very hard at each other, being like, what else can go wrong? You know, so she's now like, wait, did you give him, like, she's like, no, I'm fine, I never. So now it's just me and my mom in the hospital room, not watching Practical Jokers as one does because it's a good show, and I had a stressful event. So I'm like laughing, they're doing blood work. Meanwhile, my mom is calling everybody because back home, they thought that Thanksgiving, you know, was just kind of postponed, and that's a whole other story we'll get into a different day of who told what who and who didn't know what and who almost killed somebody, you know, so it's fine. So, you know, they do all this blood work. So over the course of the next 2 months, I get a bunch of tests done, I get an ultrasound, I get an x-ray, all these wonderful tests that I didn't think I would have to get until I was in probably my 50s, but here I am. The conclusion is there's bad wiring in my heart where one thing either just doesn't catch up right or it tries to catch up too much and it causes my heart to go super fast, but in every other facet of my life, which I still don't believe them when they told me this, I'm healthy. So I was like, cool. So no sooner do I get all of this news, the next day, guess who's going back to the hospital because he's having another episode? This guy. So this time I'm watching TV at home. I just started my new job at Skowhegan, so I was very nervous, didn't drink any water at all, didn't eat anything until about 8 o'clock at night, and when I did have something to drink, it was vodka. So like, not ideal. So I stand up, I immediately white out, fall back down to the ground, I'm like, all right. So call my stepdad, Curtis, I'm like, hey, remember that thing that happened at Thanksgiving that's happening again? I live currently like at the far from where he lives. I swore I heard his car start and basically peel out of the driveway. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I get in the car, and now it's just me, and the last time it was 2 EMTs in the back of me. Now it's just 1 EMT and 1 driver. This is before COVID. That also will come back. And the EMTs have been struggling to give me the medicine and get the IV going at the same time. He was like, hey, you, points to Curtis. He's like, get in here. He's like, okay. He's like, you're going to pull the plunger that's going to stop his heart. You ready? He's like, what? He's like, yeah, just do it. I'm going to count to 1. When I hit 1, you slam that down. It'll be fine. I'm like, oh, all right. I guess this is what we're doing now. Like, welcome to the team. So 3, 2, 1 goes. I like to say this is a bit of a dark joke, so if you don't laugh, no skin off my teeth. I died for a couple seconds. It was a little weird. Didn't see a white light or any of that fun stuff. Felt like your body turns to stone real quick. Things get, it's like someone turns the brightness down on the TV when I'm looking out. I'm like, oh, this is weird. And then you just kind of come back. So once again, go down to the hospital, this time watching Tony with Curtis. So it was nice to have, my mom this time, I got Curtis this time. Who am I going to have the next time? I don't know. And unfortunately, the next time did come. Thankfully, it was the last time. Once again, didn't drink anything all day, sat out in the hot sun, and was like, what would be good right now? About 5 beers. It wasn't. So I'm back in the ambulance, and this time it is COVID, so no one can come into the ambulance barn with me. It's just the driver who is now like partitioned off because you don't want to get that vessel. And it's just me and the EMT, because he's by himself, really struggling to get the medicine to work. So I'm just like, it's fine, casually texting people being like, hey, so I'm dying. Here's all this info you should probably know. How I really feel and where I have certain things that I want you to hide from me. Because that's not why I don't want people seeing some of this stuff. They're like, oh, okay, we got you, you're gonna be fine. I'm like, we'll find out. So now, pulling into Farmington, it's been about 2 hours that I've been at my heart. This time going about 220. So I don't know if anyone else's heart has done that. It's a little exhausting. They're trying to pull me back out of the ambulance. Guess who gets stuck again? This guy. So this time it's not as like a funny, haha, I'm stuck, look at me. It's like, I'm dying, please help. So female nurse comes out, she's like, we need to get a bigger guy. I got lifted up, which I've never been picked up by another man before, so that was awkward. Placed in a bed, and then they roll me in to the ER, and I'm like, okay. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, do you want the whole story? Because listen, my heart rate's going 220 right now. They tried to give me 6 doses of adenosine that didn't work. They tried to give me another 12, and then another 12. Those 2 didn't take. I imagine that you're probably going to give me another 12, and then you're probably going to try to jumpstart my heart, because let's be honest, it's not taking. She's like, wow, that's... I'm like, I would like to not to die, please. So, let's go. As you can see, I didn't. But still, a stressful couple of moments. So they get in there, and there's now a male nurse, a female nurse, and the doctor, and together, luckily, because they know what they're doing, they get my heart started right back at a normal pace at about like 80 or so. And I'm like, yay, not dying. I'm like, I have 2 questions. The female nurse is like, anything you want. I'm like, well, let's not say that. So there's a lot of stuff I would want, but you can't give me legally, so we're fine. I'm like, 1, I need to pee. They're like, okay, cool. They throw me a jug. I'm like, what? I'm like, can I have some privacy? The female nurse is like, yeah, sure. I don't know why the male nurse was like, no, he can't. We need to see him. I'm like, he's in this. So I don't know if you guys have had to pee in front of 3 people, like checking your vitals and stuff and giving blood work. It's awkward to be like, hi, hello, yes. This is full now. Who takes this away? So they did. And I'm like, and then she's like, didn't you have 2 questions? I'm like, yes. The TV is playing Law & Order SVU. I haven't seen this episode before. It's a procedural episode. I know Olivia's about to get some trouble, so I would like to see this. She's like, wait. You, like, 10 minutes ago. I'm like, 10 minutes ago was 10 minutes ago. This is now. And Olivia's getting yelled at by Ice-T about something, and I would like to know. So she's like, all right, I guess. Here's the remote. People will be back to do more tests. And, you know, they did tests, so 30 minutes goes by. She's now talking to BD Wong, and he said, that's a no-no on a medical exam, Olivia, stop doing that. So the nurse pokes her head back, and she's like, hey, do you mind if I sit with you? And like, I'm like, oh, why? Do you want to like talk to me about like more medical things, or like, you have more stuff I didn't tell you? She's like, no. It's just kind of weird that you wanted to watch SVU this bad, and like, I don't know, I feel like you're probably not all there mentally right now, so like, can I sit with you? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. She's like, I'm gonna eat, is that okay? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. So in the end, you know, just, it's kind of nice to have some company.
Keep it going for us and the Raps. Yeah, that's what you get for having such a big heart, Hudson. It's true. You're so as you're sitting there and you're listening to these stories, you're thinking, oh, and you're thinking, oh yeah, I relate with that, or I have a story that I kind of can follow up on that one as well. And that's a large part of what we're doing here. I have right now down in Lake Opakon, New Jersey, my family's together, having a memorial for my godfather, Uncle Walt. I chose not to go for a couple of different reasons, none of which you need to know. But one of the reasons being because I knew you were going to be here tonight. And while they're down there sitting around their kitchen table talking about Uncle Walt, I get to be here with these good folks at the kitchen table sharing stories. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, and keep your eyes open for us in the future. We will be here sooner than you think. If you would, just one more time, let's have a round of applause for Robert Holberg.